Good morning, everybody. It is a Wednesday morning, middle of the week, and this is Daybreak. It is June the 18th. Welcome to Daybreak. And as I saw Fright Foo say in the comments on YouTube, my news for the day. Well, thank you, Fright. That's exactly what we hope it is. It's your news. We give you the news that the mainstream media aren't telling you, and also give our perspective, a unapologetically conservative perspective on some of the issues that are being covered. And none other than one of the stories I covered on Monday, actually, this sad story about a 15, 16, just turned 17-year-old young girl that died alone, uncared for by the state. Died from anorexia nervosa, they believe, in emergency accommodation, separated from the family. But the problem was that the authorities and the health agencies, according to the parents, all they were focused on was the fact that this girl wanted to identify as a boy, but didn't deal with all the other co-presenting comorbidity disorders, autism, OCD, trauma as a child. What else was there? Anorexia, obviously, gender confusion. And unfortunately, a wannabe grotesque journalist, Daid Farrier, and another activist, Paul Thistle, have gone on the rampage, and they've tracked down basically commentaries on a semi-public forum of the girl. Now remember, she's 14, 15, 16, very troubled, huge mental issues going on, and to the point where she is isolated and anorexic. And the Daid Farrier has published some of these commentary that she has written against her parents. And it's very sad. And as a result, the family has responded and talked about the tragic loss of our daughter. They say, where is it? I've got basically what the parents said. They just say, it's deep sadness that we as the parents of Vanessa, so that's the name they've given her, not to identify, although by Daid Farrier publishing these, private messages on a semi-public forum, it was actually my understanding is that it's a pro-anorexia website where people gather to actually talk about the benefits of anorexia. So, that shows just how troubled the young girl was. But the parents say, we as the parents speak out against the sensationalized portrayal of our daughter's life and death. In a recent article by Daid Farrier, we're heartbroken by the story that's been shared publicly and deeply disappointed by the way Mr. Farrier's weaponized Vanessa's distress and struggles with complex mental illness. Well, for Daid Farrier, it's just about pushing back against anything that's around biology, around Christianity, think churches, think Bethlehem College. That is the modus operandi of Daid Farrier. And the parents just say, look, of course there was conflict between us and Vanessa. Now, look, here's the key thing. The reason that I know that the parents are correct in this is because everything in this story, and look, I have covered it in more detail with my McBlog, which you can see on our website, where I basically background the story. But the reason that I know that the parents are right is because I have recently interviewed 2 detransitioners in New Zealand, and I've also spoken to the parents, and their story matches up with what I've read in this story about Vanessa. So there's more to come from this. The activists are very annoyed that Radio New Zealand dared to print this story and to push back against transgender ideology. And so we're just going to have to keep pushing for biological truth and for the sake of this family. On the other side of things, I laughed at this one. My good friend Ian Wishart made a complaint against Radio New Zealand. And the story was that apparently, Radio New Zealand put out a story of climate alarmism where they talked about Hamilton's run of hot days shattered previous records. This was in February 2025. Yes, Hamilton is burning to death because of climate change and all those cows farting. Well, the only problem is that Nick Minute, Ian Wishart challenged that, citing historical data from 1934 to 1935. And it actually showed that the average maximum temperature in February this year was 28.46, which sounds hot, right? The only problem is that in 1934, 1935, it was 30. It was 2 degrees higher. And basically, Ian Wishart rightly argued that Radio New Zealand hadn't actually looked at all the historical data and got it completely wrong. But hey, lots of climate alarmism, and that's a good thing, isn't it? Apparently. Now, the other interesting thing is that a lot of the media in New Zealand are syndicating stuff, sharing stuff. So you can read an article on Radio New Zealand and next minute it's on New Zealand Herald and News Talk ZB and maybe One News, or vice versa, which sort of, I mean, do we need all these so-called independent media if they're just sharing stuff? But anyway, the interesting thing is that Radio New Zealand corrected their story when they realised they were telling porkies on this climate alarmism, but they didn't tell the New Zealand Herald and TVNZ to correct their story. So their stories, my understanding is that it still holds false information. So there we are. Another reason why maybe you shouldn't trust the mainstream media, and maybe that's why you're here this morning. All right, a couple of other interesting stories. I saw this one from the United States. It's a Republican senator who is introducing a bill this week to end the display of LGBT plus pride flags on government property. It's called the Patriotism Not Pride Act. I love it. And it basically prevents promotion of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer and intersex pride months and the display of flags representing sexual orientation or gender identity on government properties. Of course, the Trump administration has already ended the display of pride flags at American embassies and at military facilities. Now, look, American case, but perhaps we could have a private members bill here in New Zealand on that as well. I mean, Parliament even has a whole room dedicated to flags of the LGBTQIA plus QWERTY plus ampersand, brigade. So maybe we could introduce that bill. I talked about Dolly Parton on Monday and saying that there's been this trend of so-called LGBT activists or advocates getting sick of the whole pride thing and the pushing down. And there was some other more recent examples. I mean, remember when Israel Folau did it? And he paid a massive cost. But people are starting to speak up now. And here's the latest one. And it's Clayton Kershaw of the LA Dodgers. Now, they were told to wear the pride cap. You can see there the LA Dodgers there with the rainbow. The only thing is that he wrote beside it, Genesis 9:12 to 16. You probably can't see it on that photo. Let me just enlarge it there. See that? So Genesis 9:12 to 16 beside his cap. And of course, you know what that's about, the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. It's not about pride. It's actually about God's redemption and saving grace. Interestingly, this guy has not failed to speak out about other things. 2 years ago, the LA Dodgers hosted the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And basically it was drag queens dressed up as Catholic nuns. But so the LA Dodgers have got form on this. But here's the interesting thing. This guy, I mean, I've never heard of him, Clayton Kershaw, but he's, very well known. Think of the most well-known player in New Zealand at the moment in rugby or rugby league maybe. This guy feels that he needs to make this stance and can make this stance. And look, in the UK, if you follow the football, like I do, not a Liverpool player, but a Crystal Palace, the captain of Crystal Palace, is a Christian, and he wore the pride armband, but he wrote Jesus loves you on it. He got in trouble from the FA for it, but from the Football Association. But it's an example of where people are starting to push back. Now, the reason people are starting to push back, and this is consistent with New Zealand polling, is that the latest poll out of the United States on the whole transgender and sports thing, they were asked, should transgender athletes be allowed to play on teams, should only be allowed to play on teams that match their birth gender? So should the dudes only play in the dudes teams and the girls only play in the girls teams? The overwhelming, so it was 69%, so 31% still need a biology lesson. Or maybe they don't play sport and they don't understand the dynamics. But 69%, 90% of Republicans and a majority of independents, so those are those swing voters, and 41% of Democrats. So Democrats are still a little bit fuzzy on this whole thing. But here's the interesting thing. The support from the left, from the Democrats for dudes playing in women's sports has dropped by 10 points. So that's a good thing. And this is what I talk about, the whole cultural tipping point. The survey also showed a continued decline in support for the idea that changing one's gender is morally acceptable. Only 40% of US adults hold this position. It's down from previous years. So less and less people think that actually it's morally okay to try and change your sex and chop off your healthy bits and use personal pronouns. So yeah, interesting trend happening around there. One other survey is around them whether abortion is morally acceptable. This heading says that the interesting part is that it's about the gap between male and female, and that women are much more likely to say abortion is morally acceptable than men. And it's quite a wide gap. It's, what is it? It's 60 to 40, I think it is. 61 to 41. So 61% of women say it's morally acceptable, only 41% of men. But here's the interesting thing, which they don't say in the heading, is that the number of people who say they are pro-choice has dropped. It's dropped. And just last year it was 54% said abortion was morally acceptable. This year, just 49%. And the number who say it's morally wrong has increased. But the other key thing to note in all of this research, same with New Zealand, is that while people say they are pro-choice or pro-abortion, when you ask them, okay, when should people have abortions, they are very conservative. They don't believe in late term. They don't believe in sex selection. They don't believe, they want much stricter rules around coercion. In fact, we asked, up to what term should you be allowed to have an abortion? And even for pro-life people and even for women, it was around the first trimester, only in the first trimester. So people say they're pro-abortion, but they're actually quite conservative in actually the when they want that abortion to actually happen, and that's because they know it is an unborn life. Study out, I just saw apparently the abortion pill has played a key role in increasing abortion in the US. In New Zealand, once again, there's a switch over from surgical abortions to medical abortions. Big push by the Ministry of Health to have medical abortions. And they've set up the service where you can do it over the phone and have it delivered to your home. And that's why we're seeing a rise in the abortion rate here as well. But of course, the research is starting to be revealed now that the abortion pill is not that safe. And perhaps 10% of women are suffering serious adverse events, but the Ministry of Health are not being open about that, and they're pretending that it is safe. All right, just one other poll that I thought was very interesting is that they did a poll and they found Trump has been pushing IVF, which I disagree with, because the concerns is about the fact that they create a whole lot of human embryos and they are discarded or destroyed. Interestingly, The poll showed when they were asked what should be the priority, should they treat the causes of infertility or should they give IVF, it was 54% said no, treat the causes. Only 6% said you should prioritise using IVF. Firstly, causes, for example, hormonal imbalances, miscarriage, endometriosis, blocked fallopian tubes, other underlying health conditions. So you can see that there's still a dislike for the IVF aspect of things. Right, a whole lot of stuff going on today. This is one you won't see in the news. Shocking story out of Nigeria. Up to 200 Christians massacred by Islamic extremists. The single worst atrocity. Buildings were torched as people were sleeping, and anyone who tried to flee was attacked with machetes. At the market square, militants used fuel to set fire to the doors of the displacement accommodation and then opened fire as more than 50 slept. Advocates have long called for global attention to the rising trend in recent years of what they say are genocide-like attacks. There's that word, genocide. But we're only hearing about one so-called genocide, which isn't actually a genocide. Where's Chloe and all the Greens when it comes to the genocide in Nigeria and the attacks on the predominantly Christian farming communities in Nigeria's middle belt states, carried out by radical Muslims? Yeah, you won't hear about it because it just doesn't quite fit the narrative, does it? Now, McBlog for yesterday is based on the article that I told you on Monday, the incest story. Remember, Stuff put out that article about incest and sort of had this morally confused debate around whether incest should be legal in New Zealand. They went to an academic who talked about comparing the yick factor with incest with the yick factor with eating oysters. I mean, it was just a muddled article. They also started by arguing, well, actually what adults do in their bedroom, consenting adults in the bedroom has no, the state shouldn't be involved at all. Of course, when you make that statement, there's your argument for, well, actually group marriage, adultery, sadomasochism, prostitution, that the state shouldn't be involved because it's consenting adults. But by the end of the article, interestingly, they say, well, no, actually we should be, and it's right that incest is illegal. It's a very muddled piece. Anyway, go to McBlog and you'll see some coverage of that. Now, just before I do leave you, just this, somebody sent me this and I thought it was quite funny. This is your laugh for a Wednesday morning. He started believing things that I knew weren't true. At first I feared it was Alzheimer's. Then I realised he was watching One News. Somebody that was doing the rounds yesterday and somebody sent that to me and I thought that was actually very, very, very funny. All right, lots of you watching this morning. Just check. Okay, there's a few funny ones. Some of you have got a very funny sense of humour this morning, and you've put some comments down here, and I can't actually read them. Although, yeah, no, I can't read those. You're all having a bit of a play on words there, so I'll keep myself out of trouble. Okay, Friday is Matariki, so no Daybreak, but Simon O'Connell will be back tomorrow morning with Solid Ground. Remember, he's the intelligent one, so it's a far more thorough discussion. I'm just not up to that intellect level, especially at this time of morning. And it's way too cold. I'm wearing the jumper, as you can see, so it's definitely getting cold. Okay, that's all I got time for. Anyway, you have a great day.